Well, it is a Monday, and it's a chilly Monday here in the Twin Cities. So I want to say good evening, sir, and thank you for joining me here on this random Monday in not January, but really March or November. But it just feels like January in the Twin Cities. I know you and I were chatting a little bit about your weather. Seems to be actually fairly similar to ours. So good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So you were telling me you just got snow like over the
Yeah.
weekend, basically.
So we really had a big shift in weather here in Stockholm, Sweden. So last week we had maybe you have to translate this then. So we had a 15 degrees plus Celsius. So that's really
It's reasonable.
nice September weather, I would say, rather than
Right.
November.
Right.
And just over the weekend now, like in 24 hours, we have half a meter of snow and -2. And basically, Stockholm just shut down.
Shut down. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's how that
And
works.
it actually
It's
was
still
still snowing.
fantastic. It's still better than
Yeah.
Buffalo. I'm very thankful I don't live in Buffalo, New York. It's been cold and flurry here in the Twin Cities, and I was just thankful I didn't live in Buffalo because they got 6 feet of snow in some
6
places,
feet.
which
And
is a
6
lot.
feet,
That's like
that is
2 meters. Yeah,
that's 2
it's pretty
meters.
close
Yeah.
to 2 meters. So that's some serious snow. There's no getting around it. That'll shut you down for a while. So I guess we're both thankful we don't have to deal with that. And it is Thanksgiving week here in the Twin Cities. So as I said in my tweet this morning, I'm thankful that you're hanging out with me today, my friend. So why don't you tell us your origin story? Tell us how you got into this crazy world of technology, and then we got a whole bunch of stuff we're going to dive into based on our pre-show conversation.
Wow. Yeah. So maybe you have to help me then to shorten my introduction. But like I said, I'm Mattias now, and I've been working like with technology for my adult life, my entire adult life. So that is now, oh my God, 25 plus years. So I actually studied at the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, and I was studying, electrophysics. And one of the things I realized when I was doing that this is not what I want to spend my life doing. But the statistics class and all of like the software programming stuff that were in those classes was something that really hooked on me. So I started as a professional developer in like 96 or 95, maybe a long time ago. So I've been doing my share of Visual Basic and I don't know if do you remember those 4 GL languages?
Oh yes.
Like Power Builder. So we were doing Power Builder coding for Windows 98.
Okay. Wow.
Yes,
You're dating yourself now.
kind of interesting. And then I guess the web came along and everything changed. And then I guess I did my, I would say some kind of a normal developer career from, junior to senior to principal. And then the ivory tower, architect. And then after that, I went into a little bit more of management and our at some point a CTO for a small startup company. We were building a context-aware mobility engine. I don't even remember what it was, but it was well, I guess, and I've been doing, both been employed and a lot of the time I've been working as a contractor. So I would say I have been contractor for more than 50% of my career, and my last proper employment were at King. Okay. So King is a company that does games. I guess you have heard about Candy Crush.
Mm-hmm.
So there I was part of the Plataforma team that was building all of the backend stuff for the games. And then I left, 5 years ago, and then I've been running my own small company since then.
Nice. Well, so good afternoon, Glenn. Glenn says Power Builder. So I guess we've all had our turn in that 4GL space. It does amaze me how much of the software industry and how much of the energy seems to be devoted to trying to get rid of programmers. it just seems like we keep trying to reinvent, like, oh, this language, finally business people will be able to write it, this common like business language, if you will, or something similar. We just keep going back and around trying to come up with a way to get rid of us developers. They don't seem to be succeeding at that anytime soon. At least
it's kind of interesting. Yeah. So I mean, they are getting both like these languages, but also a lot of tool around that now, like Git Copilot, for instance.
Right.
That's supposed. So maybe eventually AI will write all the code.
Yeah. Right. I mean, someday you'll be able to say, like, computer, do this for me, and then the computer will do some stuff for you. But I think people. I was talking to my grad students about this on Friday. So much of software, and I don't think software is unique in this way, but there's a lot of iceberg problems where the part you can see is just a little bit, and the hard stuff is below the surface. We've seen that with social networks. People are like, oh, how hard would it be to spin one of these up? A couple of good developers could have this done on the weekend. Well, sure. I mean, just showing a timeline, but that's not the hard part. The hard part is a whole bunch of other stuff. And, so I feel like that's very endemic in software. And I think that's where a lot of these 4GL like things go to die.
Yeah, maybe. That is, I actually think that they died because of change. I think it was part of it was due to the freedom that came with the web. I mean,
right.
Back in the old days, the only thing you had to do was build something, a client that looked like it came from Microsoft. So that was an easy, and then came the web, and then an app could have so many different looks. I mean, for instance, you should have that as a UX case. If you build a cinema theater, for instance, then probably the best UI is to point on the chair where you want to sit rather than some other drop down with row and chair, or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It really did change the game quite a bit in that perspective. We were sort of freed from some of those constraints we had. Yeah. Although I always it took me a while to remind myself that we were still kind of doing the same thing. It was forms with holes in it, and you submit data to a server. We just get there in different ways. And so Thindle says, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that, but good evening to you as well, Thindle.
Yeah, I guess it's a good evening, right? So that's
I assume as much.
Yeah. I wonder if he looked that up or if he actually is Swedish.
I believe Thindle comes from your neck of the woods.
Nice.
It's always fun. Swedish. No, Swedish. Okay, so what Thindle, what'd you throw in there then? Is that I do think it's interesting how similar Norwegian and Swedish are while being very different at the same time. Countries that share such a long border.
Yeah. So I guess how I read that as no, I'm Swedish, but maybe not.
Could be. I just work here. There we go. I am Swedish. It literally is good evening. All right. So we were right. I didn't want to attempt to pronounce it because I knew I'd screw up. Anytime I see accent marks, that's so foreign to me. Although I really wish English had that. My son sent me this video of like French and English speakers trying to talk to one another, and it's like, oh, so this is pronounced this way, but it's the same as that. It's like, no, sorry, it's just English is completely random with and Glenn says that he would pull a muscle if he attempted to pronounce it. Yeah, it's strange, isn't it, Glenn, how that works? Bless your heart, Glenn. So we were chatting about this actually over Twitter last week a bit. There's a lot of tech in Sweden and a lot of tech in Scandinavia. Yeah. And I would say the same thing, frankly, about Minnesota. There's a huge tech community here. What do you think it is about places that experience winter that seems to align with technology?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's like the introverted way of staying at home, being in the dark, not hang out with your friends because you like that right now you can literally not get into town for a beer because the commute train doesn't really work and you shouldn't be driving today, I think.
Right.
So I don't know. So I guess there has been a number of explanations to this Swedish IT industry. Or I mean, even when I started 25 years ago, we had a something outside of Stockholm called the Swedish or the European Silicon Valley, even if because we had like Ericsson and a couple of other telecom companies that are from here. But I mean, lately, or like this latest 10 to 15 years, we had a huge uptake on startups and really successful companies in Sweden. Unfortunately, it seems like most of them eventually end up being bought by a US company anyway.
Sure.
But I mean, we have some of them, right? So Klarna, maybe you don't know about it yet, but you know about Spotify, I guess. And there was also a really successful Java virtual machine that was built in here in Sweden. That was called JRocket back in the days.
Yeah.
First then acquired by BEA, I think, and then lately acquired by Oracle. And they still have their GVM team here.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah. So Thindel says the reason we have technology in Minnesota is because that's where all the Swedes immigrated. Yeah, and it's in our blood. I do like to joke that I live in Scandinavia West. And as you and I were talking about in the pre-show, there's an awful lot of folks from Sweden, Norway, and Finland that all live in my general neck of the woods. Very common. Yeah. So there you go. So I guess that must be it. We all came over hundreds of years ago and brought it with us.
Yeah, 200 years ago, I guess, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. And Thindel also said Mojang. Okay.
Do you know what company that is?
I don't off the top of my head, but he said apparently they make a small game.
Do you know what game?
Not off the top of my head. My son's a bigger gamer than I am. He would probably know.
So it's Minecraft.
Yes. My son would definitely know about that when it's about mining and crafting.
Yeah. Exactly. And they are acquired by Microsoft on that topic.
Right.
And King was acquired by Activision Blizzard. That is also acquired by Microsoft eventually.
Right. It's all about acquiring. I guess that's like the end goal, right? See, I always theorize part of it is because we have this chunk of the year where going outside is borderline dangerous. And so it gives us more time to just sit around writing code. Like what else are you going to do in January? Yeah.
But on the other hand, then I guess the summer month, you're trying to be outside instead.
Right. So the summer's beautiful in this part of the world, as it is in Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway. It's gorgeous. I was very thankful that Jfokus was in May this year. That's a beautiful time to be in Sweden.
Yeah, but next time it will be in February.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I that's on our list of topics. But here we go. Yeah, so Thindel's saying he's got a friend running a web shop, and the goal is to be acquired. Yeah, totally understand the goal, but it can lead to some divergent incentives, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I guess the right reason to run your company is probably because you want to, change something, or you have this idea that you want to spread.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of, well, let me see. There's a couple of things we'll say from Thindel here. He made a couple other comments about Norwegian's a happy version of Swedish.
Yeah, and Norway is the Swedish, the happy version of Sweden as well.
That's harsh but fair. And then what are we up to? We're up to wherever the muse takes us today. But I do think this is a good time to bring up Jfokus. Speaking of that, so you've been running Jfokus now 15 years, 16 years?
Yeah, since the first edition was 2007.
Wow.
So it's
what
16th edition.
Possessed you to put on a conference? Because we all know how hard it is to put on an event.
I guess so. We have been running the user group here in Stockholm for a few years before that, and then I guess I started to travel to conferences and thought that was fun, and then I got small kids, and then I thought that instead of having me travel to all these events, maybe I can get the speakers to come to Stockholm instead.
Smart.
So it actually has kind of started as a one-day event out of the user group. So that itself is kind of a nice and fun story, because back there we had pretty successful user group meetings, and we were doing like 200 people in the evening meetings, and then we kind of decided to try to do a one day, a full day meeting, and then we had to charge something for it because we had to rent the venue and get food and stuff like that. And then I met a Canadian guy called Mike Keith. I don't know if you remember him. A super nice guy. He worked with the database back then, and I think he was responsible for maybe the first version of JPA.
Okay.
And then he said, so I sat down and talked to him, and then he actually like, oh, that's a great idea. I would love to come to Stockholm. And then he like waved over. So Rod Johnson, come over here. This is Mattias. He's doing an event in Stockholm. You should join. And Rod Johnson was like, okay. And that was kind of the start of it. And I would say we were expecting maybe 250 people for that first event. And, registration went, slowly, and it seems to be hitting on target. And then we went for like the Christmas break. And I wonder if we maybe had like an early bird thing that ended like last of December.
Sure.
And then when we kind of open up the registration site after New Year's party, then we had 500 people signed up. And the venue didn't really had room for that many people.
Okay.
So back then we were super lucky because we had like 4 tracks, and they were very uneven. I would say like this: there was typically one track with really well-known rock star speakers.
Sure.
So they had like 70% of people selecting that room. So that's how we managed, actually. So I mean, we had the breakout rooms were like 30 and 40 and 50 people. So it was it was a little bit scary, tight, and a lot of things that failed the first year, for sure.
Glenn wants to know why we do it too, and that's a great question, Glenn. It's the perennial one. Anytime anybody says let's start an event, it's like, are you sure? The amount of effort that goes into it. As we were talking earlier, right? It's sort of that iceberg problem of it looks like it's just this little thing, but there's so much that goes into getting speakers, getting the venue, all the little things that make an event worth going to for both speakers and for attendees. And it's a credit to you and your team that you continue to have a popular, successful event that we all keep going to.
And we actually almost closed down after the first year. So it was me and a group of friends, that it usually is.
Right.
After Jfokus, we didn't speak to each other for like 3 months. We were like
never doing that again.
Exactly. And then maybe like after the summer, we realized that there was a company in Sweden that was like, they were borrowing our idea and put up an event pretty much the same timing, which some of the same speakers the year after, and then it like kind of shows that I'm a little bit of a competitive guy as well. So then I decided, okay, we have to do this for the second time. And after the second time, it became a third time.
Right.
Why stop now?
It's kind of like writing a book. The first time you do it, you don't know what you're getting into, and then you're like, I'm never going to do that again. And then somebody talks you into another one, and then you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then you're like, but I'm never doing that again. And then rinse, repeat. Unless you're Venkat. Venkat just decides I want to learn about X, and then he writes a book in order to learn about X. He does it out of
probably on a flight over to a conference somewhere.
Probably. It's like, well, I had a 7-hour flight, so I had nothing else to do but write a book, learning the topic, and then writing the book about the topic. And so Thindle asks, was it Jay out of focus? Well done, Thindle.
But these days it's actually kind of unfocused because it has quite a lot of different topics.
Right. Okay, Coda Sean says that's it. I don't want to write another book either. Yeah, I'm with you until you get talked into doing it again, which is what happened to Jakob and I. So there you go. So what kind of lessons did that teach you? I mean, it's so different putting on an event versus software, and a lot. I mean, there are similarities and whatnot, but it's definitely different to go through the process of creating an event, managing an event, marketing an event versus writing code.
I guess, but I mean, since that is what we're doing, so I mean, I would say there's a trend here. I think quite a lot of the independent conference that has kind of grown out of a community or a user group or meetup that is called these days. They tend to have their own conference system, right? So I mean, so one of the things that we of course also write our own system. So everything that is back end and front end for the web and all of the call for speakers and creating the schedule and sending out invoices and handling all of that. That is something that is home. I mean, there are probably good systems to do that, but why? When you can build it yourself.
Do it yourself.
Exactly. And there also you have to build an Android Android app for the conference. So that is also coding. But I would say some similarities and but also in reality, big difference is that you have a proper deadline.
Right.
And I like that as well. So most of my time as a software developer, I really like, working with timed projects, something that has a start, a middle, and an end. And I would say every conference, like Jfokus, also have a start, a middle part, and then a proper deadline. Actually, I mean,
and you can't slip your deadline, right? I mean, if you book the venue and people are flying in, this is the day of the conference.
Yeah. It doesn't really matter if you're a little bit late or if all of your acceptance signs fail. You have people will be outdoor waiting
the shirts
to get
didn't
in.
show up. Sorry.
So that I would say that is a similar thing.
Sure.
Also, handling some of the you need to talk to your stakeholders and see what kind of figure out the right business composition to make this event be successful and happen and
sure.
Yeah. So, but of course, it's not like writing code, but and one of the really good part is that I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of developers, and I like to do that.
Right. Yeah, and you and I were talking about this in the pre-show. I mean, that's part of why I started this is because I miss hanging out with my friends, and I think that's part of what was missing during the pandemic, at least for me. And I was so thankful to get back at doing some of this again because, we can do this over Zoom or similar technologies, but you really miss out on the secret track, the conference hallway track. And So Glenn and I have talked a lot about that, the hallway track, that ability to bump into somebody and have that conversation or to be able to just hang out with people and chat about some of this. So, and I do appreciate that, folks like Phil Snable and Coda Sean and Glenn, everybody shows up here in Thindle. And, to me, that's part of what I've really enjoyed about this as well, is having this interaction. It's as close as we can get in the remote world that I have found. So, I guess we'll see.
Interesting. So I wonder if Fula Snaben also is Swedish.
Yeah, it is interesting how we've got a couple of those. Maybe it's because again I'm Scandinavian West, and so I just draw in everybody from Scandinavia.
If that is Swedish, it actually translates to what is that called in English? The elephant nose.
Oh, a snout?
Yeah, so that is ugly snout.
Ugly snout. Trunk. Okay, trunk. Got it. Ugly trunk is what we're translating to. All right. All right. So yeah, I think half the audience here is today. There you go, buddy. Who knew? Who knew? It's just outside Sweden, Oklahoma. I think so, Sean. I think that's how that works. You know, anything south of Iowa, you know, then all of a sudden you're out of Scandinavian land. Oh, well, Ugly Trunk. I think we'll have to have you on the show and we'll talk about how we got the story behind Ugly Trunk. I had no idea that's what that was. So there you go. There we go.
Learning. So
go ahead.
So sorry. So I mean, one of the things that is actually, for me at least, is even better than the hallway track is actually the speaker's dinner. So there is a lot of really, really interesting, great conversations at speaker's dinner, especially when you meet two people that have a very strong opinion on the same topic, and so that has been a few really interesting talks over the years.
Well, and as a plug for Jfokus, your dinner last year was epic. There's just no other way to phrase it. That was so much fun.
Yeah, but this was also, we had a party. We had a post-pandemic get back together party, and and also my uneven or even birthday party.
we won't get into how old any of us are because that's we've already dated ourselves with how many years we've been doing this. But I know. I don't know. Yeah. It's unfortunate that starts to creep in, but there's no getting around that. So apparently Ugly Trunk is an insanely talented developer. All right, I'm down that. But then Ugly Trunk says I'm a decent shader dev, and then people draws the wrong conclusion. Oh, you were. Oh, that's interesting. All right. Well, Ugly Trunk we'll have to get you on here then. We'll just make that happen. Nature of the beast. So CRUD. No, dude, it's all CRUD. That's all software is. It's just updating databases. My advisor told me that when I was like a junior or senior, and I didn't believe him until I'd been in industry for about, 3 months, and then realized, that's all we do is put a front end on a relational database. But,
yeah, that was actually one of the things that was fun with gaming. That in the writing games is not that, because I've been doing my decent part of insurance and banking and telecom, but if you go into gaming, it's not that anymore.
Right, and a healthy dose of YAML
and XML.
See, it's funny to me how all of the languages that we use for configuration, we hate all of them. So we started with XML because we had decent XML parsers, and so there we'll just use XML. And then, oh my God, XML sucks because it's not very human readable, and there's all these sharp pointy things everywhere. And then, well, JSON's better, and then it's like, don't miss a comma. And then we're like, YAML will help because significant white space solves all our problems. Am I right?
Yeah. And then somebody decided it would be a good idea to pull in all configuration into the code instead, with annotations and stuff.
Right. Exactly. So Thindle misses INI files. I can relate to that. I totally understand that. And let's see. Fuel says JSON is a configuration language. No comments. Clay's code. Well, you shouldn't comment your code anyway, and you shouldn't have. If you have to comment your configuration, isn't that even worse? I think that's what it boils down to. So what is Thindle saying here? Region and key value. Oh boy, that looks like what could possibly go wrong there. Nothing there would ever bring down production. Just had to use the forbidden language. Oh, auto exec bat. See, this is when you've been doing software too long, when you know what an auto exec bat file is. I'm old enough to remember, and this is kind of reminiscent of some of the tweets we've seen recently of I'm just going to shut down 80% of the microservices. What could possibly go wrong? I'm old enough to remember when I needed some extra space on my hard drive and thought I'll just delete these files that I don't know what they do, so I'll just delete them. And then amazingly, my computer wouldn't boot because I deleted the auto exec bat and an ini file. So oops.
But I think that actually, it's. I would say it's the only thing that is actually more fun than writing code is actually deleting code.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't know. At least I have done that. I came into an old project, thought that I was a king, and started to deleting, shitloads of code, and it seemed to be working fine until
Right,
somebody
right.
eventually showed up to me and said, like, the export doesn't work anymore.
Right. Part of the app
and
doesn't do what it
and
does.
then you
Yeah,
just roll back.
exactly.
Yeah. So,
Customers are complaining.
but that's good then. If you're using some kind of a version control, right? Then you just roll back to the,
Right.
and then you're fine.
Well, and I mean, there is sometimes that's the easiest way to figure out what this does is we're just going to turn this off and see who screams because that we
Yeah.
have no idea what this does or how it works.
Mm.
And it is amazing how often that happens in software. We're like, well, we're pretty sure we need this, but we're not really sure why or who's using it. I was on a project once where we had hundreds of reports. I mean, it was just ridiculous how many reports were being produced. And we finally, as we were doing this rewrite, we turned a bunch of them off because we couldn't figure out who wanted them, who requested them. And unsurprisingly, about 80% of those reports, no one ever came back and asked us where they went. So,
I think, it's
exactly,
good.
yeah. Now, Sean would go a step further and say, just get rid of the customers if they're complaining. Now it's a bold strategy, Cotton.
Yeah.
So let's see what else we got going on here. So we got the thing that gave you access to RAM past 512K is the only in DOS. Yeah, so that was always the fun of I wanted to play this game and it wouldn't fit with everything else I had. We are definitely digging into the depths of our we're showing our age again. So Mobile Win 3.1 is an April Fool's. Oh, isn't that always fun to go back and look at old technology? Exactly. So let's see that. Fendel said that opened into a C prompt. I actually showed my son a C prompt once and said, this is what computing used to be. And he just shook his head and walked away. He's like, no, absolutely not. But
I mean, it still is, right? You still have to open your terminal window.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I've got a terminal right up here in the upper right-hand corner of my machine. Yes, the scream test is the only way sometimes if you're in a big unwieldy organ. See, now I can't ever see this without saying ugly snout. So that's what I'm going to call you from now on. And then, yes, the stacks of discs. That's when you know you're old, when you remember that 3.5-inch floppies used to be able to hold things beyond, like a text file.
So that's kind of an interesting question then. So which software do you remember that had the maximum number of floppy disks needed to install it?
It was either
like Windows was 7, right?
I remember installing something on floppies from Microsoft, whether it was a Windows variant or whether it was one of the Office suites. I don't remember, but I definitely remember having that giant stack of floppies and insert the next disk, and it was a pain. Yeah, so Thindle says it might have been like 25. I'm guessing it was Office, but I could be wrong. And Thindle actually installed Windows 95 from floppies. I don't remember if I did that or not, but yeah, that was not a lot of fun. Yeah, VS being a pain in 98. Is it not a pain now? Too soon. Too soon. So, oh God, Delphi. Now we're bringing that. My God,
what is
any other languages we want?
Is this your crowd?
Wow, I'm starting to feel old here. I thought we were just young gentlemen talking about espresso, and now we're talking about Delphi and Power Builder. I mean, what next? The COBOL mines? Are we gonna go back and talk about some COBOL here? And
but I think I had like some CAD system that I installed for something that was like 35 disks or something, just ridiculous.
Right. Turbo Pascal. Oh my God, we're getting even worse. All right, so Glenn's trying to bring us in a little Postgres action. Is that worse? Oh, okay. But see, I'm guessing your keyboard self-corrected to Postgres because it couldn't be bothered to bring up Paradox. And yes. Oh, poor ugly snout does have to deal with COBOL. I apologize. And yes, Thindle, these are my people. There's no getting around that. I'm okay with that. And I know where my audience is. So there's nothing wrong with that. So
base third. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Got it. All right.
It's not
all right. And okay.
D base 3.
Perl. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, Perl.
Yeah.
Write once, rewrite the next time. Never read it because you can't. Nature of the beast. Gotta love any programming language where you can't possibly maintain it. What could possibly go wrong? But yes, Perl is a write-only language. 100% agree with that. But yeah, it is interesting, sort of that route we all take, right, to these different languages, and yes, write and then go to lunch and come back, and what the heck was I doing? We'll never know. just write it over again. It's amazing how this stuff used to work. I take a lot of. We were talking about this. Your kids are a little older than my son, but I take a lot of pride in watching a show or a movie from 20-ish years ago and seeing some outdated piece of technology and explaining to my son, that's what we used to use. We didn't have these flat panels, and we didn't have these little shards of glass that were phones. Like you had to press buttons for things to happen. Yeah.
But isn't he like really interested? It seems like some of that is, coming back. My 18 years old daughter, she really likes, my old, what do you call it? The records.
Vintage,
playing
right?
record.
It's yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Vinyl.
Vinyl. So she's wishing for Christmas she wants to have a what do you call that? A vinyl player.
A turntable. Gotcha.
Turntable.
All right. Okay, so now Glenn's bringing up editors. Oh, really? I don't think we want to get into an editor war, do we, Glenn?
Oh,
I mean, this could end badly. It's Thanksgiving. Here in the States, you don't want to bring up religion or politics at the Thanksgiving table. And I actually listened to a podcast over the weekend, how to talk to your uncle about QAnon, basically. And luckily, I don't have any uncles, so I don't have to deal with any of that kind of stuff. But editors, I think, are in that category for programmers, because people will get into some crazy battles. And Phil Snabel's telling us that Vim is bloatware. So
okay, now we
know where they stand. Yep, it's all good. It's all good. And then the Atari ST community. There is something about playing an old gaming system, right? This was several years ago, but my wife and I unearthed my old Nintendo 64, plugged it in, and we played it, a fair amount. Of course.
Exactly.
And
of course.
none of the DRM, it wasn't like nowadays where it's like, oh, well, you used to own that, but we decided to change the DRM on you, so now you don't. Obviously, the graphics aren't anywhere near what we've come to expect. I don't think in fact, one day my son was playing FIFA, and my wife said, "Who's playing?" And he said, "I'm playing." And she's like, "What?" And oh yeah, it's FIFA. It's not an actual soccer match.
But I mean, like we talked about Minecraft earlier, and games can be super fun without having awesome graphics.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point. We talked about Minecraft. We talked about, Fuel tells us that they're still creating games for the Atari. So there you go. And oh yeah, and so Thindle says there's somebody on Twitch who built a sound player and music out of the Atari. I think there is some nostalgia that goes along with that. There's no getting around it. And maybe vintage technology for some of us will be like vintage cars is for some people. Like they remember that car from their youth. Maybe we'll be like that and have, oh, look, here's my old computer and it still fires up.
As long as you're building your own VM or your own environment to, play the Atari sound with JavaScript, then you're all good.
Now, this is a good point that Ugly Snout brings up. Games as a service, once they shut it down, can't play it anymore. We are seeing that pop up where, yes, you owned this, you paid for this, but now we're shutting off the server, and now this doesn't work anymore. And I do think that's an interesting twist. Don't entirely know how to feel about that.
I guess that's true for any game that has a kind of a central server. So I guess you have to distribute that to be able to. I remember back in we were playing this first shooter game like 25 years ago. Was it Duke Nukem 3D, and then it was Quake, right?
Oh yeah, yes.
And I remember they got some interesting. I think it was back at Ericsson back in the days. Somebody opened up a firewall port and starting up, running Quake servers on Ericsson's network.
Nice.
That was a bad idea. So I'm not sure. Somebody actually might have gotten fired for that, but it was a bad idea.
That wouldn't surprise me.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me for sure.
No, gosh,
Somebody
no.
else did
No.
it.
Some other guy. Yeah, it's totally
Yeah.
fine. No, it's interesting, right? Because part of what makes some of these games so much fun is the fact that you can play with a community and you can play with your buddies, and it's a way of getting your friends online, and you can talk to them and hang out while playing a game together. You know, we did some of that during the pandemic, taking advantage of some of the streaming services, the watch with us kind of feature, and that it makes it more social. But then we have the trade-off of, okay, so then they went ahead and shut it down. What do we do about that? So yeah, so keep the original Xboxes, and maybe that's it, right? We just need to have our own backups in place and see what happens. So
Wow.
let's see, what do we got here? So okay, so Sean says the Vim lessons in the correct order, how to exit. Yep, I always seemingly have to look that up. My brain can never quite remember what to do about that. And then Thindle, I'll gladly bring my old laptop, but it weighs 15K. Mobile in name only, right? And then yeah, that's fantastic. So let's see, talking about servers, kept a Halo server up for 2 years past the shut-off date because they refused to log off. Nice. Fuel wonders if that was part of the Ericsson that developed military radars. Cool.
I didn't even know that they were doing that. Maybe they do.
This will make it feel old. Remember the original car phone? Do you ever remember the first time you knew somebody who had a car phone? My grandfather had one, and I thought that was really crazy.
Is it like a suitcase thing?
Yeah, they were huge. They were absolutely huge. So yeah, the original. No, okay, all right, that's fine. No? Yeah, it is. You know, you talk about sort of Scandinavian-based tech companies, and I of course was thinking about Nokia and how that was like the phone to have for so many years, and that ringtone. We all know exactly what that ringtone was. And you knew exactly who had it. And you're like, oh man, I want one of those. And now it's like, Nokia.
You can talk about disruptive technology there for sure. When iPhone came along, and it's kind of interesting that like BlackBerry and Nokia was late to the game.
Well, and you know, I think it's an interesting example of how quickly things can change. And as much as we think this particular technology will be here forever, and then the right combination of things happens, and nope, you are irrelevant, and nobody wants that anymore. Motorola, same kind of deal. Glenn says he used to work in a pawn shop, and so they had all sorts of that kind of stuff.
And I guess we're in the middle of that right now. What is your prediction, and when do you think that nobody really wants to buy a gasoline car anymore?
That's a great point. We actually just had a charger installed in our garage because in theory, at some point, my wife's car will be replaced with an EV. And I mean that in the sense that we have put money down, but we have no idea when said car will actually show up in the state of Minnesota, because everything takes forever now. And it occurs to me that I suspect like my son will probably only drive the gas car that is my wife's current car, and that will probably be the only one. I think after that, it'll probably be EVs all the way around. You know, it's pretty clear, especially talking to the person who installed our charger, who is booked solid, putting these into people's houses. I don't think we're going to see a lot more innovation in the combustion engine space, but could be wrong.
And then it's kind of interesting to start to think about which of the big car companies is actually going down now. Like, I don't know, Toyota.
Yeah, and I
sounds highly unlikely, right? But we see.
Well, I do think there's going to be some disruption in that space for sure. You know, there's new entrants, and at least a few of the car companies, I believe, have already announced like we're not doing gas cars anymore. It's all going to be EVs from this point forward. So, maybe modern can. So
I don't know.
I mean,
I guess that was Swedish, right? Gengas. It's something that you actually do from wood. So you burn wood, and you get
checks out. I do think now. I don't know how roads and infrastructure are necessarily paid for in your part of the woods or even outside the States, but in the US it's based largely on gas taxes, Well, if people aren't going to be buying as much gas, how do we pay for roads? We're going to have to rethink, at least here in the US, how we're going to pay for our infrastructure. Yeah. And I agree with Glenn that the cost and the electrical infrastructure is certainly going to be a limiting factor.
For sure.
I know every EV owner I've ever talked to is like, oh, you don't have to worry about range. It's like, well, yes and no. It depends on where you're driving. You know, if I'm just running errands, I don't. But if I'm going to try to drive from my house to like Oregon, I'm going to have to think out where I'm going to charge up along the way.
So I guess we have been driving full EV since 2015.
Wow.
And we use that all the way. I mean, we are going from Stockholm down to the Alps, and we have driven to Italy and Austria, and so I mean, and we have been doing that and even when it's like minus 30 in the winter, and it works.
I know it definitely does change the range a bit when it's cold. Buddy of mine bought a Tesla a few years ago, and he lives in Connecticut, and he was telling me that it knocks some percentage off for sure. But I agree, Fuel. Tesla was disruptive in more than just the EV side of it. You know, there's definitely a lot of changes, and just getting the infrastructure built for the charging network. I think that's the other piece of this that is lagging here in the US for sure. So Glenn says apparently in Georgia you pay extra for your tabs when you buy an EV. That's interesting. So yeah, I agree, Sean. I mean, how far could it even be in Europe, right? It's like 50K everywhere, so you're fine. Plenty of range driving around Europe. No, I absolutely think that's the future, right? And how quickly that gets here, I think, is the interesting question. You know, I mean, at least in the US, there's such a large portion of car ownership, and things are distributed in such a way. I'd be curious to see if it takes longer here than it might in other places. So
it might.
So Thindle says Toyota went into hydrogen fuel cells. Yeah, it's interesting how you make the wrong choice at a certain point and end up behind the curve. You know, you thought that was the thing to bet on, and then it wasn't. And yes, north. So
maybe Toyota will go into aviation instead then.
Yeah, who knows, right? Now that'll be another interesting thing. At what point do we not even have jet fuel? Do you want to hop on a plane?
That would take much longer for sure.
I think so. Having been on more than a few transatlantic flights, I don't think I want to be in a situation where like we need to top up.
That's a hard problem to solve.
Interesting. Let's see. Did I miss anything else in here? Yeah, I think that's going to be a fascinating thing to see. I wonder. Speaking of you and I both having kids roughly the same age, so my son is learning how to drive right now. So he's going through the permit process, and he'll, in theory, take his driver's test sometime in 23. I don't know exactly when because it's impossible to schedule a test here in Minnesota. I'm not so sure my grandchildren will learn how to drive. At least not in the same way we did. You know, it might be more like getting a pilot's license or something.
Yeah. So they might drive. They might only drive a car because it's fun. So they will
it's a hobby.
Drive a car. Yeah, either to have an old car or drive on a racetrack or something like that. But that's also, talking about technology. Do you think that do we see full self-driving in just a few years, or are we like 20 years away from that?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. How close are we to fully autonomous self-driving kind of vehicles? I think we're further away than the technologists want us to think. And my suspicion is we'll see it first in more limited places. Think like semis going from major hub to major hub. So at least here in the US, that's a huge part of shipping is you've got these big semi trucks that are taking a trailer from Milwaukee to Minneapolis. That's going to be most of that's going to be on a major interstate here in the US called 94. And you could totally do that autonomously in theory. They can just put the right sensors in the road, but all the little side streets and everything else, I don't know. There's so much nuance when it comes to driving in terms of road conditions and things. But these autonomous cars also are going to have sensors that us humans don't have. infrared and radar and
maybe. So Tesla is actually removing their sensors now and are supposed to do their autonomous driving on camera only.
oh,
And
ooh,
exactly. So
I don't think I love that idea.
no, I'm not so. So talking about Swedish innovation then and autonomous driving, have you heard about a company called Einride?
No.
You should check that out after this. Then,
Okay.
so they are basically building this. They call them pods. So, but
Okay.
it's basically a fully driverless semi to start with. Well, so it's
Sure.
what they do have then is they have an operator network. So let's say, and they are already on the street doing autonomous driving, but they might have like one driver per 15 trucks.
Sure.
So what happens is that you drive autonomous, and then if you get into a hard problem to solve, then they connect to an operator that drives the car or drives the truck from the office with a screen and cameras and everything.
Interesting. Well, Fuel says some suggested 10 to 20 years, others laugh just 5. I don't know. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Artificial general intelligence. AI has been one of those things that if you ever talk to anybody in the AI space for the last 50 years, it's, oh, we're only 10 years away. We're only 10 years away. And it's been that way now for 50 or 60 years. So I'm more with Tyndall. It's always been 10 years away. And eventually it won't be, but I don't know if that's in our lifetime or not. I agree with Tyndall. If you could have dedicated atomic roads, I think that might be more likely, just because the human is still the variable, and humans aren't always predictable and will do stupid things. So I guess we'll see. And so the original self-driving, I didn't see that one. So what is Tyndall saying here? They assembled a ton of press, drove a semi full speed towards a stationary car. I'm hoping that it actually stopped. That'd be bad if it didn't. But I'm amazed at how smart our cars are getting, even the ones that don't have full autonomous. There's a lot of smarts built into that until it snows. Like that's what I noticed with my car. Once the snow starts clouding up its various sensors, it says, "Oh, hey, dude, you're on your own now."
But it seems like at some point, doing driving in clear and nice weather, good road conditions,
right?
But there will be plenty of tricky situations that would be hard to solve from some, I don't know. We'll see. There's a lot of people that are smarter than me that are working on this. So,
right. Well, to your point, I think so many of the demos we've seen are in pretty idealized conditions. They're in California with well-lit roads, good weather, no strange things going on. I think about blizzards. You and I have both driven in snowstorms. You've driven in rain, driven in all these other conditions that aren't perfect. And so someone exchanged the car battery and it's smashed into the other car. Fantastic. Luckily, no one was hurt. But the poor semi driver got an airbag full in their face. So don't reset things before a demo, I guess, is the moral of the story. But I think that'll be an interesting thing to see. And it's funny. I remember my mother-in-law was actually driving us to the airport one day, and we were stuck in some traffic, and I made some comment about, I can't wait for self-driving cars because we won't have these kind of traffic jams. And my mother-in-law was like, "Oh my God, that's terrifying to me. I don't ever want anything to do with that." I thought, but think of what that will enable people to do. I think about my teenager and how often my wife and I have to Uber him places. That goes away if you've got self-driving cars. All of a sudden a 10-year-old, 15-year-old can get places without needing mom or dad to drive them. And then the other end of the spectrum, I think about folks who, either through age or vision or some other, issue can't drive anymore. Being able to just press a button and a vehicle shows up and takes you where you need to go. I mean,
exactly.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, and I would say also, especially long range travel. So Volvo had this concept car when you actually could have a full bed in it. So I mean, if you want to go to the Alps for skiing, then you can basically get there during the night and sleep in the car.
Wow. To your point, that frees up time to do other things. And
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen people do other things like watching movies,
Yeah.
and then their car smashes into a semi because, yeah.
That's a bad idea.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So Glenn thinks that's all going to end up getting us to
Yeah.
subscribe. He's probably not wrong. Probably not wrong.
But it seems like everything in the economy is going for subscription model, right?
Right.
Even if it's like electric scooters or
I am amazed how many things have become just subscribe to this instead of buy this thing outright.
Just wait until you subscribe your developer laptop.
Oh my God, I don't even want to go there. Glenn, I'm sure for just a slight upcharge, you can probably get some extra things thrown into that subscription. Like we won't take you to a sponsored location on the way because that's coming too. Well, we could take you straight in, but we're going to stop by this coffee shop that paid us to have you stop by. So Thindle says, so we're reinventing the train.
Yeah.
And I don't think Thindle's wrong.
But I would say then without the limitation of the train, there is a very obvious limitation with the train.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And so let's see here. Oh, and also brings up the fact that you can actually get a developer VM and it's fairly cheap, at least, for some value of per month. And then Glenn, of course, is saying you could subscribe to my cat's attention. Yeah, he's really picky about that, though. The terms, you really got to read the fine print, Glenn, because the terms and conditions are steep. So he's quite the lawyer, my cat. But I do think that's another interesting twist, right? And I'm sure we'll see more of that happening, where you'll subscribe to more and more things, whether that's good or bad. I think about that with all the streaming services we have. People, I cut the cable. I don't have cable anymore, but I subscribe to like 7 streaming networks now. Is that better? Is that worse?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's making somebody a lot of money, so I guess that. So the cat Eula. Got to read the cat Eula. No getting around that. No, not that. So
that was fun.
Now I know you've got a new event coming up here. Speaking of other parts of Scandinavia, what possessed you to let's do this? Not just my already existing successful event. Let's do it again. Let's go to Finland.
Yeah, we see. So it's kind of interesting when we have been doing this for a while, and you meet a lot of friends. There's a lot of people coming, a lot of speakers coming to Jfokus. You meet a lot of people in the conference circle. I do talks at other conferences as well, and so me and a friend of mine called Arno, that is Finnish. So we traveled for a meetup tour, and he was talking about the fact that there was missing a good, decent, developer conference in Finland. There are already some of them. There is a React Finland that has been okay, I think, but he felt that we should do something with the community there. We should bring some nice speakers and set up an event. And also the fact that we have over the years, usually we have quite a big group from Finland coming over to Jfokus in Stockholm. So typically range between 50 and 100 people from Finland.
Wow.
So again, all of these stories. So it started for Jfokus like maybe 10 years back with this the CEO Jonas from the front end company Vadin. So they had like a 10-year party, and they were pushing, getting the Vadin train going, and he decided that maybe we should send the entire engineering team to Jfokus as the 10-year celebration. And I said yes, and why don't you bring a few other people from Finland then? And I said that's a good idea. So we started to we did it for 5 years after that. So we had a boat. We did a cruise. So we did a meetup cruise that went from Helsinki with two speakers doing a meetup in the evening, and then they had a little bit of a party, and then they arrived early morning to Stockholm, and we had a bus picking them up from the shore. taking that group to Jfokus, and then we did that for maybe 5 years, and then people get a little bit tired of
Sure.
showing up at Jfokus hangover, and decided to fly over instead.
Sure.
So and so I think that was like the base idea that we had a Finnish community that really wanted to do an event in Finland, and then through Jfokus we had a connection with quite a lot of people from Finland, and I would say so far the uptake in the community seems to be good. People are talking about it. There is companies are interested in coming, to showcase their products and sponsor the event and so on. And people seem to be eager or happy that there is an event in Helsinki.
Sure.
But so far, it feels a little bit maybe like US. So there is very few people. So I guess maybe it's hard to start up a new event post-pandemic because it seems like everybody I'm talking to in Finland says that people are signing up really late. And that makes the entire thing so hard to predict. And we are taking, a huge risk when we have to commit to the venue, and not only to the venue, but also, I mean, you are supposed to speaking there if it happens.
Right. Exactly.
At some point you have to book travel, and and then if you commit, then you book travel and you fly over there, and like you're expecting maybe at least 200 people, maybe 500 people, and then we have a 4-track conference with 45 people.
Right. It's hard.
I mean, it's hard and it's not fun.
We were talking about this earlier too, and it definitely seems like the pandemic obviously had a pretty huge impact on our events, and at least the in-person stuff, my experience, stuff based in Europe seems to be rebounding fairly well, not universally, but fairly well. Whereas a lot of the US based stuff, especially this fall, has really struggled. And some of that I think is pandemic related. Some of that is larger macroeconomic trends. But it is interesting to me to see some of that dichotomy. And, I'm curious what you've seen that's changed, and how you've run events between pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and what do you think is going to be, the long-term impact of some of those things?
Yeah, I don't know if I think we can talk about it. I don't think I'm having any, I think as much as I know, but we can reason about it.
Right.
So it seems like, quite a lot of things changed during the pandemic, and there are post-pandemic effects that is hanging in there that is hard to actually, it's because, before the pandemic, everything was like normal. A little bit predictable to some extent, and people liked hanging out. And one of the bigger features we talked about that the hallway track, and the hallway track is so hard to imitate on a virtual conference. And just hanging around with your friends, drinking beer, listening to music, have great intelligent conversations about software and the world. And it seems like I don't know. It seems like maybe people are getting unused to that or whatever. Like we have been home with a pandemic for maybe 2 years, and maybe you have to get out again to realize what you're missing.
Well, and I was talking to Venkat a bit about that too, and it seems like concerts have come back strongly, certainly here in the US. I mean, Taylor Swift just obliterated poor Ticketmaster, and I think people will still get together for I guess entertainment, and maybe some folks don't look at us as entertaining. I don't know, but hopefully,
but you were at you were at Jfokus last year, and we were sold out. We were fully booked,
right?
So this year I also went to Java Zone in Oslo, Norway, and they were also sold out. Jfokus Belgium sold out in like I don't know, less than a day.
Right.
So it seems to be, I don't know if Europe is bouncing back quicker, but I also think that there is so for Jfokus we sold out quickly last year, and we will sell out again this year, I think. But it's a little bit slower. So maybe like the first year after the pandemic is something you really want to go back, and then I don't know. And I also think that I don't know about US, but we had a last autumn, or last fall, everybody was really happy to get back, and we had like fully booked meetups with 100 people, more than 100 people. And then we had a second lockdown between mid-December to mid-February, and it seems like that, at least for me, it had a huge impact on this, like, yes, we're getting back, and no, we get locked down again.
The rug was pulled out. I don't have any reasons or answers as to why it seems like US events are taking longer to bounce back, but I agree with you. I certainly have seen plenty of EU based events that are selling out or getting awfully close, and US events seem to really be struggling, and I don't entirely understand the difference there. I guess we'll see.
How is your meetups going?
Well, I've talked to several different meetup organizers, and several of them that tried to go back in person. In fact, I did, I think it was the Utah Jug in August-ish timeframe, and that was virtual. And someone asked, why aren't we back in person? And the organizer said, well, we tried that, but nobody showed up, or we only had 10 people. And so it seemed like everybody wanted to just be remote. And, I agree with Glenn that there certainly seem to be some economic headwinds that are playing some role in this. I don't know that that's completely the description as to why US events still seem to struggle even back in the spring. But meetups seem to be struggling more with, as you and I talked about in the pre-show, we're out of the habit. And I think so many folks would go to a meetup after work. And so they were already near-ish to the venue, and they were already away from their family. And so going for another hour, that'll just be dinner then, no big deal. But now with so many people working remotely, well, now it isn't just me hanging around after work. It's now I've got to get in the car and drive somewhere. And it might be 20 minutes away. It might be an hour away. No, I'm not going to do that for an hour presentation. I'll just wait for the video to come out, or I'll watch a video online, or I'm just going to go hang out with my family or do my hobbies or whatever. So I get that. And I'm not sure why the destination events are having that same level of struggle though, but.
So is that the difference? So what is actually a destination event? That is something I don't really have heard before.
Yeah. To me, that's an event where you have to travel to, although as you and I were talking about, it could also be an event that you commute in and out of, but we're there from 8, 9 in the morning till 4, 5, 6 o'clock at night. And, I agree, Glenn, that it seems like meetups, most people are coming from home, not the office. And so I am a little surprised by that, although I don't think that's universal. I mean, there's some events that still seem to be doing okay, but I don't think anybody in the US is sitting there turning away people, and some events are getting pushed out or rescheduled. And I don't know. I'm hopeful 23 things will be more normal, but your guess is as good as mine. Just like with fully automated cars, we know it's coming. We just don't know if it's in 2 years or 20 years. So, so Glenn says regional events are showing a bit more strength. I could see that, where there's that. And as you and I talked about at the beginning, with these events that came out of existing communities where, just like DevNexus sort of grew out of the A-Jug, same kind of thing. I agree. I think 23 will be a really important year from that perspective. But
then we also have like a little bit the economy is slowing down a little bit, so that will also I think will have a huge effect on like destination events, and because it's quite expensive to fly into, for instance, Oracle Cloud World or Java One and book a hotel in Vegas. And
well, I don't know, Glenn, you've got lots of useful information too, bless your heart. Well, my friend, we've already gone past the top of the hour, and I know we could continue to have. I mean, again, I never know where these conversations go. I never would have thought we'd get into self-driving cars, and yet we did. I knew we were going to talk about conferences because that's the world you and I live in. But as always, it was a lot of fun to catch up with you. I appreciate that, and I hope the weather gets a little warmer for you. I think it's supposed to get warmer here in the States, at least my part of the world. So I'm hoping the little amount of snow on my ground is gone by the weekend. But
and you're lucky to get back back here in Sweden in February then.
Looking forward to it, man. Looking forward to it.
So we have had editions where people actually can't get out because they are missing their flights because of the weather.
Yeah, that is true. That has I've had some interesting flight experiences in my 15 years of doing this for sure. And guardedly, I remember one time I was in Chicago trying to get to Europe, and I was going to fly from like Chicago to Minneapolis over to Amsterdam and then on. I can't remember where the event was, but they couldn't get me. Minneapolis was getting hammered with, I don't know if it was snow or a lightning storm or whatever, but couldn't get me to Minneapolis. I'm like, well, I don't actually need to go to Minneapolis. I need to go to Europe. And they're like, oh, well, can we just put you on this KLM flight? Yes.
Thank you.
So that would actually be better to go from here to there. So Fuel said they had to fly out of Minneapolis once during a snowstorm. Yeah, that's not a lot of fun. Yeah,
but it usually works, I guess, if you're used to it. So Arlanda never closes down. So I mean, I'm pretty sure that they had all flights on time or near time, even through the snowstorm here right now. So have you decided that if you're hanging around for the speakers unconference after Jfokus?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at my schedule yet to see what else I got going on. It depends on my teaching schedule, probably more than anything else. When I got my grad students are back in person full time, and I think in the spring I'm actually going to have some undergrads, which I don't know how to feel about that one. We'll see. Yeah, I've never had undergrads before, so I don't know how to feel about that. But it we are back in person, which is good and bad. I mean, I like the energy, but I hate having to drive down on a campus and park and then deal with the traffic and the people who just wander all around without being college students.
But it's worth the price.
Oh, I genuinely do enjoy being in person, although I don't think I've probably only had one class where actually everyone is physically in the classroom, because we've had almost every week somebody isn't feeling good, their spouse tested positive for COVID, or there's been something where something happened where
we never talked about mixed event. That's really interesting. So
that one's even harder. That's a lot harder because, when I've got like this weekend, I had 3 students remote and everybody else was in the class and we were doing presentations. And so then it's really hard for, you got to hop on the Zoom call so the people online can hear you and you can share your screen, and it's like, and then they're trying to ask questions, and
we haven't really yet decided. So last year at Jfokus, we had the opportunity to, join virtually online as well. And a bunch did, but
sure.
It's also like, you have to remember to talk to the camera as well.
It's hard. It adds another piece to the equation. And we actually talked about that a bit in our grad program, because we were remote for 2 years. I had one cohort that I never saw in person. And in fact, I don't think they were in person other than maybe one day the entire 2 years of their program. And so we, as a faculty, were having this conversation about, would we want to open it up to remote? Because then all of a sudden it isn't just people who live within 75 miles of the Twin Cities. It could be people from literally anywhere. And would that be a pro or a con? I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
I think it's kind of interesting if you talked about events but like education might be beneficial for some to do, because I guess some of the universities has opened up now for much more remote classes. So
right. Yeah, that does have an interesting sort of ramification for snow days. I know that was certainly a fond memory of me from growing up was, we got a bunch of snow, school's canceled today. Yay, we're all hanging out. And now it's like, school will be online today. Like,
Yeah,
kind of lose out on that a little bit. But
yeah.
what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Well, my friend, thank you so much. I'll be back next week with another conference organizer. It's conference organizer week for me here.
Wow.
Apparently, Ekaterina will be hanging out. We'll be chatting about, I'm sure, Spain and global software architecture and things of that nature. But let's see. Oh, the teachers will be upset. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not as much fun to, when they have to work through it as well. But thank you, my friend. It was great hanging out with you. I look forward to seeing you, early next year. And, fingers crossed that 23 is more normal than 22 was.
Yeah, I hope that too.
I mean,
okay.
We'll see what happens, right? We'll see what happens. But
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time. It's good. I love the interaction today. Thanks to all my wonderful guests and my wonderful audience, fantastic people, and we'll see you all next week.